Parents called me a burden and told me to leave. Now they regret it as my success shocks them. Hey, everyone. I never thought I'd be posting here, but after what happened, I need to get this off my chest. For most of my life, I felt like a background character in my own family. I wasn't the troublemaker, but I also wasn't the golden child. I was just there. My parents never outright said they didn't care about me, but they had a way of making me feel like I didn't really belong. And my older brother? Well, to them, he could do no wrong. If he slacked off in school, they made excuses. If he got in trouble, they bailed him out. Meanwhile, I worked my ass off, kept my head down, did everything right, yet I was always the problem. If I ever spoke up about the blatant favoritism, my dad would snap, "Not everything is about you." And my mom would sigh and tell me to stop being so sensitive. I spent years convincing myself that maybe I was just overreacting. Maybe if I worked harder, proved myself more, they'd see me. But nothing changed. And eventually, I stopped trying. But the real turning point? That came the night they told me to my face that they wished I wasn't there. It was a regular Saturday night. I had just come home from my part-time job, exhausted but looking forward to a hot meal and some quiet. When I walked into the living room, I saw my brother sprawled on the couch, gaming like he had no care in the world. Nothing unusual. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My backpack was on the floor, dumped out, my notebooks and school papers scattered everywhere. I walked over, picking up the mess, trying to keep my cool. "Dude, what on earth?" I said, holding up a notebook with torn pages. He barely glanced at me. "Relax, I just needed some paper." Some paper. He had ripped out pages from my school notes, probably without even checking what they were. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose it. "Where are they?" He nodded toward the kitchen. "Probably in the trash." I walked over, opened the bin, and sure enough, there they were. Crumpled, stained with food, completely unusable. I just stood there for a second, staring at them. This wasn't the first time he had messed with my stuff. But this time, something inside me just snapped. Not in a loud, angry way. More like an icy realization. Nothing was ever going to change. I turned back to him. "Seriously." He rolled his eyes. "God, you're so dramatic." "It's just paper." "Yeah." My voice was eerily calm. "Then let's go ahead and rip up your game discs since they're just plastic." That got his attention. He sat up, eyes narrowing. "Don't be a dumb." Oh, I was the dumb. I was about to say something else when my parents walked in from the backyard, laughing about something. My mom caught sight of me standing there, fist clenched, and immediately sighed like she was already annoyed. "What now?" I told them what happened. The torn notes, the trash, the absolute lack of care. And do you know what they said? My dad rubbed his temples. "Why do you always have to make a scene?" My mom just waved a hand dismissively. "It's just paper." That was it. That was all they had to say. No telling my brother to apologize. No acknowledgement that what he did was wrong. Just instant irritation with me for daring to be upset. And then, my dad muttered the words that would stick with me forever. "I wish you'd just leave." My brain short-circuited for a second. "What?" I asked, thinking I misheard. He looked right at me. "You're always sulking, always complaining. Maybe if you moved out, we'd finally have some peace around here." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mom, standing next to him, didn't even argue. She just nodded. She actually nodded. "You're a burden," she added. "Things were better before you came back." Before I came back. Like I had somehow ruined their lives by existing in the same space. I should have screamed, cried, begged them to take it back. But instead, I just stood there, completely numb. At that moment, I realized something. I didn't have to stay. They didn't want me there? Fine. I'd go. So, I turned around and walked out. Not to my room. Not to cool off. But out the front door. And I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. Down the sidewalk, past the houses I'd grown up around, into the quiet streets that felt both familiar and completely foreign at the same time. My phone buzzed a couple of times in my pocket, but I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood to read whatever passive-aggressive messages my parents were probably sending. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fix things. I wasn't trying to reason with them or fight to be heard. I was just done. Eventually, I found myself at the bus stop near my old high school. I sat down on the bench, exhaling slowly, feeling the weight of the night settle over me. It was weird. There was no dramatic music, no grand moment of realization, just silence and relief. It was like I had been holding my breath for years, and now, finally, I was letting it out. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and hovered over one name, Ethan, my best friend. I hesitated for a second. It was past midnight, but if there was anyone who wouldn't judge me, it was him. I hit call. 2 rings, then a groggy voice. Dude, what on earth? It's like midnight. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling stupid for even calling. Yeah. Sorry. I hesitated. How was I supposed to explain this? Hey, my parents basically told me they didn't want me around, so I left. Mind if I crash at your place? But before I could fumble my way through it, Ethan yawned. You good? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Not really. That was all I had to say. Where are you? He asked, instantly more awake. Let's stop by the high school. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. He hung up before I could argue. 15 minutes later, his car pulled up. The second I got in, he took one look at me and muttered. Yeah. He didn't ask questions. Didn't push. Just turned up the radio, let me stare out the window, and drove. When we got to his apartment, he tossed me a spare blanket and pointed at the couch. Make yourself at home. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the coffee table. I groaned, rolling over, debating whether to just turn it off entirely. But then I saw the notifications. Missed calls, 18. Text from mom, 6. Text from dad, 4. Text from unknown number, 1. I frowned, sitting up. The unknown number caught my attention. It wasn't a random spam message. It was short and to the point. Your brother screwed up. Bad. I stared at the screen, my heart picking up speed. Ethan walked in, rubbing his eyes. Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost. I turned the phone toward him. Look at this. He squinted at the screen, then raised an eyebrow. Okay, what does screwed up mean exactly? That's what I'm about to find out. I took a deep breath, opened my mom's messages, and started reading. The first few were frantic. Where are you? Come home now. This isn't funny. Pick up your damn phone. We have a serious problem. Call me back. Then came the one that made my stomach drop. Your brother got arrested. I blinked. Read it again. Ethan let out a low whistle. Damn. Didn't see that coming. Neither did I. I scrolled further. The next message from my dad was just as blunt. He's in jail. We need you to help us figure this out. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, so now they need me. Ethan snorted. Yeah, I was about to say. Didn't they just tell you to get lost? Yep. And now they're blowing up your phone because the golden child finally faced some consequences? Looks like it. He shook his head. Dude, don't even respond. Make him sweat. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But a part of me, some deep, twisted part of me, needed to know more. So, against my better judgment, I typed back. Define screwed up. The reply came almost instantly. He was caught stealing. Cops arrested him. Bail is $10,000. 10 grand. That wasn't pocket change. I exhaled slowly, staring at the message. My parents weren't texting me because they suddenly cared. They were texting me because they needed me to pay up. I wasn't even surprised. But what did surprise me was my reaction. Because instead of feeling guilty or obligated or panicked, I felt something else entirely. Power. For the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. I let them wait. For once in my life, I was in no rush to answer. I tossed my phone onto the couch, leaned back, and let the weight of it all settle in. They had made it very clear that I was unwanted, that I was a burden. And yet, the moment my brother messed up, I was suddenly important again. It was almost funny. Ethan sat across from me, arms crossed. So, what's the plan? I exhaled. Honestly, I don't know. A week ago, if this had happened, I probably would have dropped everything and run home to help. But now, I shook my head. I don't owe them anything. Exactly, Ethan said. They kicked you to the curb. Now they need something, and suddenly you're family again? That's bad. He wasn't wrong. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through the texts. The more I read, the angrier I got. They weren't worried about me. They weren't apologizing or asking if I was okay. They only cared about fixing my brother's mess. Then, a new message popped up. Mom, we need your help. We can't do this without you. It was such a stark contrast to what she had said to me just last night. You're a burden. Things were better before you came back. I wish you'd just leave. And now? Now they needed me? I clenched my jaw. I could feel Ethan watching me, waiting to see what I'd do. So I made them wait a little longer. I spent the rest of the day avoiding my phone. Ethan and I went out, grabbed food, and wandered through the city, talking about anything except my family. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. But the peace didn't last. By evening, when we got back to his apartment, my phone was still blowing up. Missed calls. More texts. And then, one that caught my attention. Dad, we're selling things to come up with the money. The TV, my golf clubs, whatever we can. I snorted. His golf clubs. The same ones he wouldn't even let me touch growing up. Now, they were sacrificed for my brother. Ethan glanced over at my screen. Well, desperate much. Yeah, and they still haven't apologized for anything, have they? Nope. That was what really pissed me off. Not once had they said, "We're sorry for how we treated you." Not once had they even acknowledged that they had screwed me over. They just expected me to step up and fix things. Like I always had. Like I always would. Except, not this time. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, finally, I texted back. Me, I'll think about it. That was it. Nothing more. And immediately, my phone blew up again. Mom, thank you, honey. Please hurry. Dad, we don't have time for you to think. We need you now. That one made me laugh. Oh, now you need me? I turned to Ethan. Want to see how long they last before they start getting nasty? He smirked. Oh yeah. So I waited. I let an hour pass. Then 2. 3. And just like that, the messages changed. The guilt-tripping started first. Mom, we raised you, we gave you everything, and now you turn your back on us? Dad, this is your brother's future we're talking about. You want to be responsible for ruining his life. Then came the anger. Dad, if you don't come home and help, don't bother coming back at all. Mom, I hope you can live with yourself after this. And finally, the begging. Mom, please. We're sorry. We just need you right now. That was the one that made me pause. It was the first time the word sorry had appeared in any of their texts. I stared at it, debating whether or not to believe it. Are you considering helping them? Ethan asked, watching me carefully. I let out a slow breath. I don't know. Maybe. He didn't say anything for a moment, then finally shrugged. It's your call, dude. But if you go back, just be careful. Don't let them suck you into the same cycle again. He was right. And I needed to be sure that if I helped them, it was on my terms. The next morning, I finally texted back. Me, if you want my help, I have conditions. The reply was almost instant. Mom, anything. Please. I smirked. Anything? All right. Let's see if they really meant that. Me, first, I want a written apology. From both of you. In the family group chat. I knew they would hate that. They wouldn't want my extended family to see them admitting they had treated me badly. They want to sweep it under the rug, pretend everything was fine. But I wasn't letting them. There was a long pause. Then, finally. Dad, fine. I wasn't done. Me. Second, I want it made clear that this money is a loan. I expect every dollar back. Another pause. Mom, we'll pay you back. We promise. I wasn't sure I believed them, but that was their problem. Me. Lastly, I want you both to acknowledge that the way you treated me was wrong. I want you to say it. Not just in text. In person. That one took the longest. Minutes passed. I almost thought they weren't going to answer. Then, finally, the little typing bubble appeared. Dad, okay. We'll do it. I exhaled slowly, my grip on my phone tightening. Guess I'm going back, I muttered. Ethan gave me a look. Are you sure about this? No, but I needed to see it through. The drive back to my parents' house was surreal. Less than 48 hours ago, I had walked out, fully prepared to never return. And now, here I was, heading straight back, not because I wanted to, but because they needed me. The entire way there, I kept reminding myself, you're not doing this for them. You're doing this for yourself, to prove a point, to get what you deserve, to finally have some power in this family dynamic. Still, I could feel the tension creeping into my shoulders as I pulled into the driveway. Their car was there. They were waiting. For a brief moment, I considered turning around and leaving, just to mess with them a little longer. But no, I wanted to see this through. I wanted to watch them squirm. I stepped out of my car, walked up to the front door, and knocked. The fact that I even had to knock at my own parents' house? Yeah, that said everything. The door opened almost immediately. My mom stood there, looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy, her hair messy, and for once, she didn't have that usual air of judgmental disappointment. Come in, she said, stepping aside. I didn't move. Did you send the apology? I asked flatly. She hesitated for half a second before nodding. I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, and scrolled. And there it was. A long-winded, awkwardly phrased message from my dad's number. It was exactly what I expected, formal and cold, as if he was writing an email to HR after being forced to attend sensitivity training. We would like to acknowledge that we have made mistakes in the way we have treated our son. We deeply regret any pain we may have caused and recognize that our actions were unfair. We hope to move forward as a family and appreciate his willingness to help in this difficult time. No warmth. No real accountability. Just an admission that they had messed up because they had no other choice. I snorted. Wow, that must have killed you to type out. My dad, who had been sitting stiffly on the couch, cleared his throat. It's what you asked for. No, I corrected. It's what you needed to do to get my help. Big difference. He clenched his jaw but said nothing. Good. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The air in the house felt different, not welcoming, not comfortable, but off, like they knew they had lost control. And they hated it. I sat down across from them, arms crossed. All right, let's hear it. My mom looked confused. Hear what? The part where you say it to my face. She shifted uncomfortably. We already sent the message. I held up a hand. No, that was for the group chat. Now, you say it to me. In person. Because you've spent my entire life pretending I'm not worth listening to, so I want to hear you say it. Silence. My dad exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. Fine. We were wrong. I raised an eyebrow. Wrong about what? More silence. He clearly wanted to just throw out a blanket apology and be done with it. But I wasn't letting him. We were wrong in the way we treated you, my mom finally said, her voice quiet. We weren't fair to you. We didn't appreciate you enough. And we should have been better parents. I studied her face. She sounded sincere. But was it real sincerity? Or just desperation? I wasn't sure. Still, it was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. I turned to my dad. And you? He was staring at the floor. He didn't want to do this. But he did. His voice was tight, forced. We should have treated you better. That was it. No actual apology. No real ownership. Just an acknowledgement that things had been bad. But, again, it was something. Good, I said, leaning back. Now we can talk about the money. My dad immediately perked up, like he had just been let off the hook. We need you to cover the rest of the bail. I shook my head. Loan. Not a gift. A loan. You will pay me back. Every cent. He frowned. We will. But it's urgent. And I need it in writing. My mom's breath hitched. In writing? Yes, I said. We go to the bank, take out a contract. You agree to pay me back in full, with a deadline. No excuses, no delays. You break it, I take legal action. Simple. They were not expecting that. My dad's face turned red. You don't trust us? I let out a dry laugh. Oh, now we're asking about trust. Silence. I let the moment stretch just to make them sit in their discomfort. Then, finally, I spoke again. You don't get to pick and choose when I'm family. You don't get to kick me out one night and then demand my help the next. I leaned forward. You wanted me gone. Now I am. And this is just business. I could see the anger in my dad's eyes. But he couldn't argue, because he knew I was right. Finally, he muttered, fine. Good. I stood up, grabbing my keys. Then let's go to the bank. The car ride there was silent. I could feel the tension radiating off of them. They were pissed that I had control, that I was setting the terms. But they had no other option. When we got to the bank, I sat down with an advisor and had everything documented. A contract. A repayment plan. My parents signed, begrudgingly, while my mom kept sniffling like she was on the verge of tears. I didn't care. Once it was all finalized, I handed over the check. They took it without saying thank you. Of course, they did. As we left the bank, my dad turned to me. Now will you come home? I actually laughed at that. Are you serious? I shook my head. No, I don't live here anymore. You can't just cut us off, my mom whispered. Sure I can. I looked them both in the eyes. I'm done being your afterthought. You don't get to treat me like garbage and then expect me to be there when it's convenient. I walked to my car, not even looking back. Wait, my mom called after me. Can we fix this? I paused, hand on the car door. I took a slow breath. Then, without turning around, I answered, that's up to you. Then I got in, started the engine, and drove away. Driving away from my parents' house felt like stepping off a sinking ship. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living with the weight of guilt on my shoulders. I wasn't doubting myself, replaying conversations in my head, or wondering if I should have said something different. I had one. Not in a petty, vengeful way, though. Yeah, there was a certain satisfaction in watching them squirm, but in a way that mattered. I had finally drawn the line, and they knew it. The realization settled in as I pulled into Ethan's driveway. I sat there for a second, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process everything. I had just bailed out my brother, the golden child who had spent his entire life treating me like I was nothing. And I wasn't even angry about it, because for once, I had done something on my terms. I stepped out of the car and knocked on Ethan's door. He opened it immediately, taking one look at me and smirking. So, how'd it go? I let out a long breath. I got what I wanted. Did they kiss your feet? I snorted. Not quite. But they did sign a contract. Ethan let out a low whistle. Damn. So they actually agreed? Had no choice. I plopped down onto the couch, rubbing my temples. They were desperate. And how do you feel? That was a good question. Because honestly, I felt weirdly calm. Like the version of me who spent years craving their approval had finally shut up. They're still them, I admit it. Still selfish, still unwilling to fully take responsibility. But at least they acknowledged it. And now? Now they owe me. Ethan nodded. So what now? I thought about it. About what came next. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. Mom, he's out. We just picked him up. I stared at it for a second. Then another text popped up. Dad, we appreciate what you did, even if you don't believe that. I raised an eyebrow. That's new, I muttered, showing Ethan the screen. He read it and snorted. That's not appreciation. That's, I feel like it. A hole but don't want to say it out loud. I chuckled. Probably. Still, it was something. But before I could even process that, another message came in, this one from my brother. Brother, wow. You really made them grovel, huh? I rolled my eyes. Me. You should be thanking me. You'd still be in a holding cell if I hadn't helped. The reply came fast. Brother? Yeah? And what do you want? A medal? There it was. The same ungrateful, smug attitude. Like I had done something inconvenient for him. I shook my head. Dude's literally walking free because of me, and he's still a dumb. Ethan groaned. Of course he is. You could save his life, and he'd still act like he's the main character. I ignored my brother's message, tossing my phone aside. I wasn't letting him ruin this moment for me. For the next couple of days, I kept my distance. I didn't check in. I didn't ask how things were going. I focused on work, on figuring out my next steps, and on enjoying my space. But my family? Oh, they weren't done with me yet. The first call came from my dad. I let it ring. Then came a text. Dad, your brother wants to talk to you. I frowned. That was unexpected. So I replied. Me. Why? No response. Then, an hour later, another text. Brother, we need to talk. I stared at it, trying to decide if it was worth my time. Ethan, sitting next to me, peeked at my screen. You gonna answer? I shrugged. Don't know. Kinda curious what he has to say, though. So, against my better judgment, I called him. He picked up immediately. Finally, he muttered. Yeah, I said flatly. What do you want? He hesitated. Look, I didn't ask for you to bail me out, all right? I rolled my eyes. You're welcome. Silence. Then he sighed. I don't get you. That made me pause. Excuse me. You had the chance to completely screw me over, he said. Could have let me rot in there. And yet, you still helped. Even after everything. I let his words sink in. And yeah, maybe that was strange. But it wasn't about him. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it because I wanted to. Because for once, I got to call the shots. Not mom, not dad. Me. Another pause. Then, in a quieter voice, he muttered, huh. I could tell he was processing it. And honestly, I didn't need him to understand. I had already won. I thought that would be the end of it. My brother had said his weird, half-hearted, huh, and I figured that was as close to self-awareness as he was ever going to get. I wasn't expecting a heartfelt reunion. I wasn't expecting him to change. So when he called me again the next day, I was already suspicious. All right, I answered. What now? There was a long pause on the other end. Then, finally, he sighed. I just wanted to say thanks. I blinked. It was the first time in years that I'd heard those words from him. But before I could even begin to process it, he kept going. I mean, don't get me wrong, he added quickly. It's still kind of messed up that you made mom and dad beg, but whatever. You got what you wanted, right? And just like that, whatever tiny moment of sincerity had been there evaporated. I let out a short laugh. There it is. The golden child still can't handle not being the center of the universe. He groaned. Dude, I'm trying here. I rolled my eyes. No, you're trying to make yourself feel better about this whole thing. More silence. Then, in a voice quieter than before, he muttered, maybe. I sighed. Look, I don't expect you to suddenly become a different person overnight. But if you want to have some kind of relationship with me, that starts with you owning up to the way things have been. Another pause. Then he surprised me. Okay, he said. I get it. And I'm sorry. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. That easy. He let out a dry chuckle. Well, I'm already on thin ice with mom and dad. Figured I should at least try with you. That wasn't exactly touching, but it was something. So, instead of pushing, I just nodded. All right, let's see if you mean it. The next few days were quiet. My parents had officially stopped texting me, probably because they were too busy pretending nothing had happened. My brother, on the other hand, was suddenly acting different. Not in a drastic way, but I noticed it. He sent me a meme one morning. Something stupid, something random, but it was the first time he had ever texted me without an ulterior motive. A few days later, he called just to talk, not to ask for anything. And then, a week later, I got another text from him. Brother, hey, you want to grab lunch? I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The other part of me, the part that had spent years being dismissed, pushed aside, treated like an afterthought, was curious. Because if this was real, if this was even a small step toward fixing things, then maybe, just maybe, I wanted to see where it could go. So I replied, me, yeah, why not? We met at a diner. Nothing fancy, just a small place with good coffee and greasy food. And for the first time in forever, we talked. Not about our parents. Not about the mess we had just gone through. Just normal stuff. Movies. Work. Life. And yeah, it was awkward at first. We weren't exactly used to talking like this. But by the time we were finishing up, it didn't feel forced anymore. It felt kinda nice. He paid for lunch. Another first. And as we walked outside, he turned to me, shoving his hands in his pockets. Look, I know I don't deserve any credit for this, but I am trying. I studied him. For once, he looked like he meant it. So I shrugged. Then keep trying. He nodded. All right. Then, for the first time in our entire lives, my brother did something that shocked me more than anything. He pulled me into a quick hug. It was awkward, kinda stiff, but real. And then, just like that, he stepped back, cleared his throat, and said, all right, loser. I'll see you later. And before I could even react, he turned and walked off. I stood there for a moment, processing. I never thought I'd see the day. Maybe, just maybe, things could actually change. I didn't expect my brother to follow through. I figured the lunch thing was a one-time effort, his way of easing his guilt before going back to the way things had always been. That's how it worked in my family. Things never actually changed. But then, he kept checking in. Not every day, not in an over-the-top way, but consistently. A meme here, a random what's up, there. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had ever gotten before. And as strange as it felt, I found myself not hating it. I wasn't naive. I wasn't expecting us to magically become best friends overnight. But at the very least, it felt like something real. And that was more than I had ever thought I'd get. My parents, on the other hand, stuck to their usual pattern. The moment the crisis had passed, they acted like nothing had happened. No more texts, no more calls. Just radio silence. And honestly, I preferred it that way. At first, there was this weird, nagging guilt, like I was supposed to reach out to smooth things over. But every time that feeling crept in, I reminded myself. They made their choice. They had pushed me out. They only wanted me back when they needed my money. And once they got what they wanted, I became an afterthought again. Fine. I had already decided I wasn't chasing them anymore. A month passed. I kept doing my thing. Work, friends, life. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like my own person again. Then, one day, I got a text from my mom. Just one sentence. Mom, are you ever coming home? I stared at it for a long time. Not we miss you. Not we were wrong. Not can we talk. Just are you ever coming home? Like I had taken a vacation. Like I had run away instead of being told to leave. I could have ignored it. Could have let it sit there, unread. But I didn't. I replied, me, I am home. Because I was. It just wasn't with them. I didn't expect a reply. And for a while, I didn't get one. But then, weeks later, something strange happened. Another text. Mom, we're having dinner this Sunday. If you want to come. That was it. No guilt tripping. No demands. Just an invitation. I hesitated. Because of this? This was new. They weren't telling me I had to come. They weren't demanding I fix something for them. They were asking. For the first time in my entire life, the decision was mine. Sunday rolled around, and I still hadn't made up my mind. Ethan, of course, had thoughts. Are you seriously considering going? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I sighed. I don't know. Maybe. Just to see. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Okay. But let's be real. What do you expect to happen? That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't expect an apology. I didn't expect a heartfelt reunion. But part of me, some small, ridiculous part, wondered if maybe, just maybe, things could be different. So, for better or worse, I decided to find out. When I pulled up to the house, my stomach twisted. I didn't miss this place. But I had history here. I walked up to the door, hesitated for a second, then knocked. A moment later, my mom answered. She looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to show up. Hey, she said awkwardly. Hey, I replied. She stepped aside, letting me in. The house looked the same, but it felt different. Or maybe, I did. Dinner was weird. Not bad. Not tense. Just weird. My dad made an effort, barely, but it was there. My mom kept the conversation light, avoiding anything too emotional. My brother? He was different. He included me in conversations, asked me things, actually listened. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some magical Hallmark movie moment, but it was something. And maybe, for now, that was enough. After dinner, my mom walked me to the door. For a second, it felt like she wanted to say something. Maybe, I'm sorry. Maybe, we were wrong. Maybe, we miss you. But instead, she just nodded. See you around? It wasn't much. But for once, I didn't feel like a burden. I nodded back. Yeah, see you around. Then I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was heading toward it.